Prologue 5. The Honest Mercenary. Spells, arrows, and crossbow bolts whipped by overhead as a pair of earth ponies crouched beneath the dusty rocks in the desert, a few miles out from Appaloosa. "It'll be easy," you said. "Quick job. In and out. No trouble," you said. I distinctly recall a conversation to that effect, Bray. The stallion hunkered beside his larger fellow, offered a hapless smile. "What can I say? Trouble just has a way of finding me." A pair of magic missiles slammed into their cover, blowing off a large chunk. You don't say. Slinging a massive crossbow from her back, the burly mare fired a bolt in, then locked it into place. I do say, as a matter of fact. Easing out from his cover, the lankier pony peered around the rocks toward their opponents. "I see the wizard, little on the right." "My right or your right?" "We're facing the same direction, Cross. It's the same right for both of us." "Oh, right." With a grunt, the large mare whipped her weapon over the rocks, barely poking out of their cover for a second before firing across the way, aiming her weapon slightly to the right. She caught a return shot from a bow in the shoulder, but barely flinched as she ducked back down. "Well, did you hit him?" "Wait for a bit." Both ponies perked their ears. A sudden explosion and alarmed screaming signalled the bolt of impact's detonation. "I got him." Brayburn was on his hooves and galloping across the way in a flash. Crossfire was already reloading her crossbow, sighting down another target as the lanky stallion closed on their foes. A long, dusty leather coat trailed behind him as he ran, zigzagging across the sand and evading shot after shot fired from the rival mercenary company. One bolt pierced his beloved jacket and slammed into his chest, ricocheting harmlessly from the gleaming breastplate he wore beneath. "Now that's surely going to be a bruise." The loud twang of Cross's bow sounded from behind him as one of the mare's huge bolts buried itself in the chest of an enemy archer, flinging him through the air to land in a lifeless heap on the ground some distance away. Springing over the rocks and landing in the midst of the ponies attacking them, Brayburn drew a pair of short swords, each glowing with an eldritch aura, one vermilion green, the other an icy blue. "Gentle colts, I strongly urge y'all to drop those weapons, and I guess whatever bits you're carrying too." Their response was to draw steel of their own, advancing on him menacingly. 5 of them versus 1 of him were pretty good odds that shifted as another bolt slammed home, dropping a second stallion lifeless to the sand. "Now, I promise you she's just going to keep doing that, whether you stick me or not." Already down 3 of their number, the remaining mercs weren't liking their odds so much anymore. Even if they managed to bring Brayburn down, his sniper would no doubt pick them off one by one in the process. Deciding discretion was the better part of valour, they turned and ran for the hills. As soon as they turned, Brayburn lunged, burying his icy blade to the hilt in one of the ponies' backs. The 3 survivors whirled on him in shock before another bolt dropped a third, leaving only 2 alive. With a casual shrug, the stallion withdrew his blade, allowing the dead merc to drop to the sand. "What? Didn't say I was gonna let you go. Just that it'd be a whole lot easier on you all if you did." Fury and desperation spurred the pair to attack the smugly grinning stallion. The expert swordsman easily parried their clumsy attacks, shoving one back and into the path of a bolt from Crossfire. The final pony swung wildly, screaming in fear all the while. Brayburn casually sidestepped his charge and tripped him, sending him crashing headlong into the rocks with a resounding crack. As his head slammed into the unyielding stone, moving to deliver a killing blow, the stallion hesitated. Crossfire was trotting up casually, the case containing their cargo secure at her side as she stowed his crossbow. "Ain't you killing him?" Brayburn shook his head. "It's just a colt. Let's relieve the deceased of their valuables and get back. We've got a delivery to make." Brayburn personally stripped down the wizard, helping himself to a pair of wands and a set of braces that in his opinion looked magical, and that was generally enough to assume it was enchanted. He glanced over at his usual partner on these sort of jobs. Crossfire was a big mare even by Earth Pony standards, easily a head taller than Brayburn himself. Cross had a deceptively cheerful lime green coat mixed with a lemony yellow close-cropped mane and tail. Sporting a leather coat of her own, though black rather than Brayburn's brown, the expert sniper had sturdy, studded leather armour on beneath it. "Anything good over there?" Brayburn trotted away from the very deceased wizard to join his partner. "Maybe. Got some stuff for the brothers to eyeball. Might be something worth something." "Good. These other fellas got squat. Few bits between 'em." The lanky stone shrugs with a affable grin. "That was a few bits we didn't have till just now, at least, right?" "Ha! Guess that's true. Come on, let's get this whatever it is to that client. Still can't believe they sent out this many idiots to stop us. What in Tartarus do you think it is?" Brayburn shrugs again as he set out toward Appaloosa at a brisk trot. "Dunno. We ain't getting paid to see what's in the case, so we don't look in the case. You know how it goes." "Think the others are doing alright?" "Are they doing alright? You do remember who went with them on this one, don't you?" Cross blinked. "Oh, right. Heh, sucks for whoever they're up against." "That it surely does, my friend. That it surely does. You know, the wiry Earth Pony mare ducked a heavy swing from the Minotaur's massive ace. You could help." Skipping backwards out of the brute's reach, she released a flurry of throwing knives, most ricocheting harmlessly off the brute's armour, but a couple struck home, drawing blood and a pained bellow from the raging creature. "Now, I could be recollecting entirely wrong here, but on the way here, you very closely stated that I more often than not just got under hoof, while real fighters did the heavy lifting. That sound about right, do you reckon, Ditz?" A grey-coated Pegasus mare giggled at the speaker's question. "Yup, I remember Fritter saying something just like that on the way up here." Her mismatched eyes widened as one of the small, lizard-like beasts fighting beside the Minotaur hurled a spear her way. Hoof flying to her chest, and the holy symbol there, she intoned a sharp word of power, raising a shimmering, mystical shield and harmlessly deflecting the missile. "Hear that, Apple Fritter? Ditsy Do here recollects that too." The beleaguered mare growled under her breath, narrowly avoiding another blow from the axe. Ditsy's soft chanting sounded from behind as Fritter felt the warmth of healing magic flowing through her body, sealing up the worst of the cuts she'd already taken. A couple of the braver kobolds, when noticing she was the easier target than the Pegasus priestess on the rocks next to the comfortably reclining Earth Pony mare, and closed in. "I could really use a hoof down here." Smirking slightly, the reclining mare tilted the bridge off her well-worn hat back, gazing coolly down at her imperiled cousin. "Say it." Another growl escaped the mare, one laced with pain as a kobold's spear slipped through her leathers, drawing blood. "Y'all are the best fighter this side of Canterlot, and we're helpless without you. And don't you forget it." Springing from the rocks, the well-muscled mare landed beside her cousin with a heavy thump. Her sudden entrance into the fray drew a mildly surprised look from the Minotaur. The kobolds were more focused on the most comically huge greatsword strapped across her back, contained within an incredibly ornate sheath. Patchwork plates of armour covered her chest, shoulders and flanks. Slowly reaching across her back, the orange-coated mare swung the massive sword off, sheath and all. The kobolds began to snicker and move in once more. Still leaving the blade in its cover, the warrior swung it quicker than the reptilian creatures thought anything could move a weapon so big. She swept the pair in the wake of the leather-bound sword, lifting them from their feet and sending them tumbling over the side of the cliff. Their screams had barely begun to fade as the Minotaur roared and charged her, axe raised. Diving to the side, the mare thrust her sword sharply at the side of the passing Minotaur's knee. With a sickening crunch it bent inwards, and he tumbled to the ground, howling in pain. The remaining kobolds stared wide-eyed, before flinging their weapons aside and scurrying back to their holes. "How come nothing ever runs screaming from me?" Chuckling, the warrior mare swept the massive blade around and secured it to her back again. "Because you fight with them cute little butter knives instead of using a real weapon." Her fellow tribe's pony bristled at the insult. "Daggers are a real weapon, Applejack. We can't all be muscle-bound behemoths like you." The mare in question sent a smirk toward her smaller cousin. "If you say so, Fritter. Now I do believe we're being rude to our guest." The smaller bright green mare blinked in mock surprise. "Why, Applejack, you're right. This isn't how you show proper Apple family hospitality at all, is it?" The Minotaur with the shattered knee groaned in response as the pair of earth ponies stood before him. "Howdy there, partner. Name's Applejack. This here's my cousin Applefritter." The smaller mare tipped an imaginary hat at her cousin's introduction. "Mighty pleased to meet ya, and who might you be?" The burly Minotaur blinked dimly at the sudden charm in the large mare's voice. What? Huh? Odd name, but I ain't one to go making fun of the handle some critter's mama felt the need to attach to him. So now that we're all friendly like, I've got one real simple question for ya. Where oh where might those missing Pegasus fillies be?" With a vicious growl, the Minotaur swatted at Applejack, causing her to dance back quickly. "Even if I did know, I wouldn't tell you anything." Applejack heaved a sigh, removing her hat and holding it over her heart. "Now that is a shame, a real shame. You see, my cousin here's a specialist of sorts." "Expert, you might say," Fritter put in. Applejack nodded towards her cousin. "Right. She specializes in... Now what was that big fancy way you put it, Fritter?" "Information extraction." Slowly twirling one of her wickedly sharp knives at the tip of her hoof, Fritter nodded. "That's it on the nose, cuz." The larger mare beamed in pride. "See that? Told you I'd remember eventually. Now I just call it torture, but I'm a more simplistic sort of pony, you know what I mean." A spark of fear was visible in the bullman's eyes, but he didn't look to be breaking any time soon. "I'm not scared of some pansy ponies." "I do appreciate that there alliteration, Mr. Watt. Not one for fancy wordplay myself, but I can appreciate it when some pony or someone else uses it. So what we have ourselves here is a bit of an impasse." "I don't know, AJ. You seem to know your way around words pretty well now and again." "Thank you muchly, Fritter. Anyhow, the impasse. You know what we want, but you don't seem to want to talk. I'm gonna ask my good friend Ditsy-Do up there to make herself scarce right quick. This sort of business makes her a little queasy, you understand." The Pegasus in the priestess robes waved cheerfully at being mentioned. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Watt." "Ditsy's a right respectable priestess of the great Lady Celestia and all. Torturing ain't no business she needs to see. Ditsy, would you mind excusing us for a quick sec? Fritter needs to have a less than genteel conversation with Mr. Watt here." "Oh, sure thing, AJ. You guys have fun." The grey mare ducked behind the rocks, giggling softly to herself. Applejack and Applefritter both turned their full attention back to their captive audience. "There we go, alone at last. I always preferred to work in private, personally." Applejack nodded slowly. "Want me to make myself scarce too?" "Nah, we're family after all. Ain't no such thing as too much time with family." "Couldn't agree more, Fritter. So, Mr. Watt, this here's the last time I'm asking nice." Fritter eased closer, brandishing one of her blades for emphasis. "The fillies." Gulping heavily, the recently Christian Mr. Watt found his eyes glued to the gleaming dagger. "I can't say, they'll kill me." Some of the confidence left Fritter's face at the Minotaur's continued refusal. Tugging Applejack a short distance away, she hissed under her breath, "What do we do now?" Applejack shrugged. "I don't know. Torture him?" Fritter blanched. "I ain't torturing any pony." A faint faint frown crossed Applejack's muzzle. Before she snapped up Fritta's dagger in a flash, and before the Minotaur had time to react, she slammed the blade through the top of his hand, pinning it to the stone, drawing a renewed howl of pain. A tattoo covering one side of her face glowed with a blue light for a moment, then faded when the weapon left her hoof. I'm sure an expert could do that a mite more precise like. Some kind of fancy way of cutting or stabbing or slicing or whatever you do when you're torturing. I, however, am not an expert, so we'll do it this way. I ask, you answer. You don't answer, I stick another one of these here knives in you someplace. Eventually you're gonna look like a big pincushion, because trust me, my cousin has more than a few of these little stickers. A frowning Ditsy-Do appeared, gazing down at the scene with a disapproving look. Applejack! Now, Ditsy, I ask politely to excuse us. It ain't very polite to eavesdrop. Don't think Lady Celestia would approve. Ditsy chewed her lip in sudden concern. Head sinking low, she miserably sunk back behind the rocks. So, Mr. Watt, the fillies. Sweat was beading on the Minotaur's brow. I can't. Helping herself to another of her cousin's daggers, Applejack rammed it through his other hand, pinning both to the stone floor. Her tattoo glowed brighter, causing the mare to wince. How about now? Think you can now? You don't know what they'll do to me. Well, that surely is the truth. I do not. I do know what I'll do to you. Picking up another dagger, the tattoo branded across her face began to glow hotly, smoke sizzling from the magical brand. She raised it high, and the pinned Minotaur began to shriek. I'll tell! I'll tell! Tossing the weapon aside, her brand called instantly. Well, I'm all ears, Mr. Watt. The Hook-beak brothers took him up the mountain a ways. There's a cave, maybe a quarter mile into the mountains. Just keep heading in and east. Can't miss it. They're there. Mr. Watt, you've been too kind. I do appreciate your honesty. Could say it's the one thing I value most in a new friend. Fritta, would you kindly retrieve your daggers? My brand's acting up a touch. Wrinkling her nose in distaste, the smaller mare yanked her daggers free, causing the burly Minotaur to whimper louder. Relax, you big baby. Ditsy'll fix you up and send you on your way. Let me go get her. Fritta trotted back the way Ditsy appeared, leaving Watt and Applejack alone. Applejack perked an ear, listening for her cousin's hooves to fade. Coming up this here mountain, I couldn't help but notice the occasional deceased pony with what looked to be wounds made by a sizable axe. Would you happen to know anything about that, Mr. Watt? Looking away, the Minotaur nervously cleared his throat. Nope. That friend of yours is going to be here soon. The mare sighed and swept her hat back atop her head. You all might recall I mentioned I find honesty to be a very important policy. I most surely am a mare of my word, you see. Had me a bit of trouble a while back. You might have noticed this here fancy tattoo I'm sporting. They hand him out to the occasional pony who does something not quite in line with what my folks think is respectable. Sorry if I offend your pony moralities. The line I can overlook. Most every pony does it at some point or another. It's what you're lying about that sort of gets me riled up. Don't take kindly to folk like you that prey on folks who can't defend themselves. Cradling his injured hands, the Minotaur snorted derisively. You some sort of paladin? He barely had time to register Applejack's buck. She spun in a flash and lined up her hind legs, slamming them into his chest and sending him flying over the lip of the cliff, to plummet to the same death as his kobold cohorts had met. Not any more, partner. I still don't understand, Applejack. How'd he slip? Fritta slot her cousin a dirty look. Yeah, how exactly did he slip? Applejack had many talents. Her sword work was second to none in the crew. She could turn apples into just about any culinary wonderment a pony could imagine. She was even a pretty good dancer, she said so herself. Lying, however, was not one of them. He just slipped. Ditsy-Do wrinkled her nose. I guess there was a lot of blood around. Seizing on the opportunity, Applejack nodded rapidly. That's it. Poor fella stood up, slipped in some blood, and down he went. Ditsy shook her head sadly. That's a shame. Fritter still gave Applejack a hard look. Yeah, a real shame. If the leader of their little team felt any remorse, she was doing an unusually good job with her poker face for once. S'pose so. Reckon that's the cave we're looking for? Fritter squinted ahead. Across a short ravine there was indeed a large cave. I see some big feathers by the entrance, too big for a Pegasus. S'pose that's the one. Don't see anything guarding it. Probably more kobolds inside though. Probably. Nothing we can't handle. Ditsy, would you mind getting us across? Saluting smartly, the Pegasus priestess wrapped her legs around Applejack's barrel, pumping her wings hard and lifting the heavy mare into the air. Oof! You need to lay off the pie, Applejack. Grunting heavily, the bulky mare kept her thoughts on the matter to herself as Ditsy-Do transported her across the way. Settling back on all fours, she started into the cave as Ditsy returned with her cousin. The trio slowed to a halt as they began to descend into a tunnel network. There were no torches or sunlight, so Ditsy chanted a soft prayer and a globe of bright golden light appeared above her head. None of them were particularly adept at stealth, so they trotted briskly through the tunnels, not caring what might hear their footsteps. They came to their first fork after several long minutes of walking. Which way, Dits? Ditsy rested a hoof against her holy symbol, eyes closed as she intoned another prayer. Soft golden light shone around her eyes as she examined both paths. There are ponies down the right one. Right? Find the fillies first. Worry about the rest second. Let's move it, ladies. Applejack again took up the lead, heavy hoof steps and bulky armour raising quite a racket. It came as little surprise that the next chamber they entered sported half a dozen kobolds ready and waiting with weapons drawn. Huh? Ditsy, would you like to do the honours? With a nod to Applejack, the cleric began a prayer filled with more power than the last two. The kobold stepped back warily as a bright shining runic circle appeared before her. Their nervousness turned to terror as a tremendous roar shook the cavern. Within the circle a massive black furred bear appeared, glowing with a bright golden corona of light. Roaring a second time, the huge celestial animal burst into a rapid charge, sending the kobolds shrieking down a side passage. Apple Fritter cast a wary eye down to the side passage. It's gonna eat him. Ditsy-Do shook her head. Nah, celestial animals only eat celestia food. It'll just maul him to death. Both Apple cousins raised an eyebrow at the cheerful tone in Ditsy's voice as she said that, but at length they shrugged indifferently. Right, let's see if we can't find them missing fillies. The other two mares nodded at Applejack's orders and fanned out in the large chamber. Ditsy's magic light illuminated it well enough that they could see most anywhere. Fritter gave a shrill whistling, bringing the other two running. Look here. She held up a tiny pink feather. That surely ain't no griffin feather. Let's get a move on. As one of the mares moved with purpose down the passage the feather had lain in, a larger group of kobolds awaited them, surrounding what looked to be a small pit in the centre of the room. Easily twice the number of the monsters awaited them as were in the last chamber. Ditsy frowned. I can't summon another bear. Applejack and Fritter both shared a wild grin. Fun way it is. The pair leapt forward with nearly identical whoops of excitement. Applejack swinging her massive sword off her back, the sheathed weapon smashing the first kobold she came down upon into the ground hard, leaving it unmoving as she charged into the fray. Apple Fritter held back for the time being, flicking dagger after dagger into the rushing creatures. She felled two of them for three more were on her, thrusting their crude spears at her. Fritter winced as Gypsy leapt in from behind, bringing her warhammer down atop one of the kobold's heads. Hard enough it split it wide open, showering the apple mare with bits of bone and other sorts of things that one tended to want to keep in one's head. "Ditsy do!" The Pegasus shrugged. "Whoops, my bad." Applejack was fending off the remaining kobolds with little effort. Each swing of her huge blade crushed another of the little beasts. A powerful thrust caved the chest of another, sending the corpse flipping down into the pit, drawing an alarmed, high-pitched yelp from within. Sweeping her sword back and forth, she scattered the surviving monsters, sending them yipping from the room. Peering into the pit, she searched for the source of the voice. "Any pony down there?" "Yes, hello?" A tiny pink-coated Pegasus filly squirmed out from beneath the dead kobold. "I'm here." Smiling kindly, Applejack swept her sword back into place on her back. "Don't you worry, little missy, we'll have you up right quick." Looking back to her still disgusted cousin as she tried to clean herself up, the larger apple mare huffed. "Get your bath when we get back. For now, get over here and toss a rope down to that filly." Casting a dirty glance towards the slightly grinning Pegasus, Apple Fritter eased towards the hole and lowered her rope in. "Get a hold nice and tight now, honey. We'll haul you on up." The filly nodded rapidly and wrapped the rope around her foreleg. Gripping it tightly with both hooves, she clung to the rope as the apple mares hauled her out of the pit. Applejack squinted down at her. "Where are your sisters?" The filly's eyes went wide. "Those griffins took them, ma'am, into their room up ahead." Handing the filly over to Ditsy, Applejack nodded back the way they came. "Get her out of here, Dits. We'll catch up soon." The concerned priestess ushered the filly to stand behind her, before chanting a quick prayer and touching Applejack's flank. The mare's already considerably muscled bulked up a good deal more, causing her to grunt at the sudden tightness in her armour. A second prayer saw Fritter moving far more lighter on her hooves. "You two be careful. Don't make me come looking for you." Giving her a confident nod, the two cousins slipped deeper into the caves, leaving Ditsy alone to escort the filly out. Applejack and Apple Fritter caught the smell of blood at the same time, and both mares folded their ears back. Sharing a knowing look, they eased into the chamber at the end of the corridor. The hook-beaked brothers were a notorious pair of killers with a very hefty bounty on their heads. Worth far more alive than dead, more than one bounty hunter had tried to bring them in and wound up a meal for the carnivorous pony-eating duo. Twins, rumour said, birthed from the same egg. They were twice the size of either pony mare, even with Applejack's magically enhanced physique. The Leone lower halves were heavily muscled, claws sharp enough to dig furrows in the stone beneath them. Their beaks, they were named for, hooked a good deal more sharply than the average griffin's. Beaks currently wet with blood. "Ah, more guests. You must be the ponies our little lizard friends are all worked up about. Very brave coming in here alone." Applejack's eyes shifted from the bloodied beak of the one speaking to her to the suspiciously tiny amount of meat at the centre of the table. "We're looking for a couple of missing fillies." The older brother slurped up to the last of his meal. "Congratulations, your search is over. You found them," he finished by patting his stomach. "You monsters, they were just fillies." Fritter looked ready to rush in, but Applejack laid a restraining hoof on her cousin's back. "They were, yes. The young ones just taste so much better than the adults, you see. The meat is more tender, very succulent." Applejack's eyes narrowed tightly. "I'll give you fellas one chance to come along peaceable like." Both griffins blinked at her offer before bursting into uproarious laughter. Oh, little pony, you are a funny one. It's almost a shame to make a meal of you." Grunting softly, she slung the heavy blade off her back. resting the tip against the ground. "Can't say I didn't offer." The monstrous pair eyed the sheathed sword in confusion. "You're not even going to try to defend yourself? How do you plan to fight without drawing your sword, little pony?" An unpleasant smile worked its way across Applejack's face. "Why don't you fellows come on over here and find out?" Neither griffin was stupid. Both had lived a decadent life as long as they had by being smarter than those who came looking for them, and being the better fighters. They developed a twin fighting style that had served them well for many years. Each bore a wickedly curved and barbed scimitar. The swords, combined with their own natural weapons, had made them a nearly invincible fighting duo. They'd never run afoul of the Apple family mercenary company before. Apple Fritter sprang into action first, launching a furious barrage of daggers at the brother on the right. The cagey griffin fighter managed to weave around several, but for each one he dodged another, lodged into the soft spaces between his well-maintained leather armour. The second brother made to rush to his sibling's defence, only to find Applejack's sword arching through the air right at his head. He snapped his wings open, beating them furiously to carry himself back at the last second. As the sheathed blade cleaved through the air, biting into the stone floor with a tremendous crash, digging a deep trench as she wrenched her sword free. Fritter began to back away from her opponent as he abandoned his attempts at dodging her attacks and charged in with a furious screech. Feeling her haunches touch against the back wall of the cavern, she waited until she was almost within striking distance, then heaved forward with her forelimbs, pushing herself off the ground and against the wall. Coiling her hind legs, she sprang over the head of the rushing griffin, landing behind him with a soft grunt. Drawing a pair of daggers in her hooves, she vaulted onto his back, bearing them both up to the hilt at his shoulders. His bird-like forelegs went slack as she severed the tendons there, and he fell heavily to the floor of the cave. "Brother!" Applejack's foe spread his wings, intending to take flight and rush to his brother's aid out of reach of the ground-bound pony. He never imagined the strength she had contained in her compact little body. Crouching low to the ground, she waited until he was just beginning to pass overhead before she sprang upward at an alarming pace, curling into a tight ball and crashing into his chest. Her heavily armoured frame smashed against his leather armour, and she heard a loud crunch as her body broke some kind of bones in his chest. The mare casually wondered about the sort of bones she had there. Was it the chest bone? Did your ribs go all the way up into your chest? She might have to ask Gypsy about that later. Putting her musings aside, she watched him passively as the griffin wheezed heavily on the ground, working hard to draw breath. She glanced at her cousin as she cantered to her side. "Well, that's that then. What do we do with them?" Applejack swung her sword back into place on her back. "I reckon I got a couple of ideas. Why don't you go catch up with Ditsy-Do, Fritter? I'll be along right quick." Apple Fritter winced, casting the monstrous griffins a sympathetic look. "Sure thing, Applejack. I'll see you outside." Applejack stood calmly as her cousin beat a hasty retreat to the entrance of the cavern. With casual ease she strode over to one of the brothers' dropped sword. "Now, if I recollect rightly, you all wanted to see me with a blade drawn." The dim cavern was better illuminated by the hotly glowing blue brand on the mare's cheek. "Suppose the least I can do is grant you fellas' final request." Ditsy frowned as Apple Fritter emerged alone. "Applejack?" Fritter shot a quick glance behind herself. She's wrapping things up." The rescued filly looked up at the mare anxiously. Did you find my big sisters?" Apple Fritter's heart sank at the sight of those huge, hope-filled green eyes. We did. I'm so sorry, sweetie. They've gone to the fields." Tears began to form in the tiny pony's eyes. "Like my grandparents?" Ditsy knelt down to the filly's level, wrapping a warm wing around her tiny quivering body. "That's right, sweetie. They're with your grandma and grandpa now. Don't worry, you'll be seeing them again someday." But I want to see them now. It isn't fair." The poor foal was soon wailing her heart out, while Ditsy tried her best to console her. Apple Fritter turned to the sound of approaching hooves. Applejack emerged, her brand still burning hotly. Small trails of smoke curled away from her burning flesh, bringing an unpleasant smell to the air. "Let's get this little one home." Neither Ditsy nor Fritter commented on Applejack's burning tattoo, nor did they ask what became of the hook-beaked brothers. Some things they felt were better left unknown. Applejack watched from a short distance as Ditsy and Fritter spoke with the filly's parents. She frowned as the mare broke down and started weeping heavily. Cradling her surviving child tightly to her chest, the father ushered them inside before coming back out to speak with her cousin and the cleric. Her discomfort grew as the stallion approached her, tugging her hat down a bit self-consciously in a futile attempt to cover her brand. She turned her head away. "I don't care about that, miss. What you did in the past is between you and Lady Celestia. I want to know what happened to those monsters who killed my fillies. Your friend said she left you alone with them." Applejack tilted her hat back up, meeting his eyes. "They ain't going to be hurting any pony ever again, sir." His face hardened. "Did they suffer?" Sweeping her hat from her head, she placed it over her heart. "I am many things, sir, but a liar ain't one of 'em. So you can have complete faith in me when I say that they suffered more than any living thing can likely imagine." He nodded firmly. "Thank you for that then, miss. I know it's not quite the same as having my daughters back, but that helps. You'll be paid in full. It's the least I can do." "We surely appreciate that, sir. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry we couldn't get there quicker." "Me too, miss. Me too. If you'll excuse me, I'd like to be with my family." "Of course, sir. And if you'll have any needs like this again, I hope you'll consider hiring the Apple family again." With a final nod to Applejack, the stallion turned and made his way back into his house. Fritter and Ditsy moved to Applejack's side, and the three set out towards the outskirts of Appaloosa. Ditsy was the first to speak. "Applejack, if you want to talk..." "What might I want to talk about, Dits?" The cleric frowned. "Well, some of the others like to talk about, I know I'm silly and clumsy all the time, but I am a cleric. I'm there for confessions." Applejack raised her eyebrows. What exactly would I have to confess, Ditsy do? I ain't never made a secret of what I do." Ditsy sighed. "It's just that you used to be is exactly right. I ain't what I am anymore. I don't need you poking your big nose into my business. If your girls will excuse me, I'm in the mood for a hot bath." Applejack quickened her pace, leaving her cousin and family friend behind. The three approached their home and conveyance parked in the desert just outside of town. The huge skyship was one of the few treasures the Apple family still owned, and they put it to good use. It was a holdover from the rebellion, but definitely de-weaponized. The only reason they'd been allowed to keep it at all was the formidable matriarch of family's insistence. The Magitech ship was powered by a rechargeable magic core at the heart of the ship. The mechanical aspect was looked after by the unicorn brothers hired on by the Apple family. Brayburn was standing outside the ramp leading up to the ship with a white-coated unicorn mare. "Howdy, cuz. How'd your job go?" Applejack's response was to hurl the bag filled with bits at her cousin's head with a vehement amount of force. The visiting mare's golden aura wrapped around the bag, arresting its flight, before gently levitating it to Brayburn's hooves. The stallion gave the visitor a faltering smile. "Thank you kindly, Miss Sonny. And please excuse my cousin's poor manners. She can be a mite ornery from time to time, but no better mare to have at your back in a scrap." The pink mare unicorn smiled warmly. "It's no trouble at all, Captain. I know ponies of your profession can have colourful personalities. It's what makes meeting you so much fun. Brayburn chuckled and nodded politely, collecting his cousin's pay. Well, that's mighty big of you, ma'am. And here comes a much more friendly branch of the apple family tree. This here's Apple Fritter, and our resident preacher, Mayor Ditsy Doo. The Mayor, Sonny, turned a smile towards the approaching pair. A pleasure to meet you both. Pleasure's mine, ma'am. If you'll excuse me, though, I reckon I'd like to get myself a hot bath. Bit of dirty work, Bray. I'll fill you in later. He chuckled. Better than you, Jackie. Go on and rest up. Ditsy Doo was staring hard at the visiting Sonny, both eyes for once aligned in the same direction as she squinted at the increasingly uncomfortable-looking mare. Brayburn hastily stepped between them. Ditsy, why don't you head inside too? You're making our very wealthy customer uncomfortable. Ditsy nodded slowly, Enver taking her eyes off Sonny. Sure thing, Brayburn. She finally broke her stare when she disappeared into the ship. Brayburn turned an uncomfortable smile Sonny's way. I apologise, ma'am. My crew seems to be on the insane side today. Oh, I don't know. The world would be awfully boring if every pony was sane, don't you think? Ha! I reckon so, ma'am. So, I suppose you all are eager to get your hooves on this here case. Sonny's eyes lit up as Brayburn pulled the small wooden case from within his coat. Very eager, yes. I have your pay right here. She lifted a hefty bag of bits from her saddlebag, exchanging them for the case. Well, that's how I like my jobs. No complications. Sonny's smile dimmed a little. Yes, no complications. I wonder, Captain, would you be available for more work? It's a much easier job, I promise. Brayburn's eyes lit up with the promise of more easier work from the wealthy mayor. Sure as shootin'. Apples ain't happy if we ain't workin'. Wonderful. I need you to transport some ponies for me. Pick up 4 mares from Celestia's Academy and take them to Ponyville. Brayburn's eyes widened a little. We ain't exactly a passenger craft, ma'am. Would 100,000 bits be enough to make it a passenger craft? Why, yes. Yes, it would. Would our guests like a cabin with a window? Applejack leaned her sword against the wall of her sparsely furnished quarters aboard the ship. Dubbed the Harmony by her addled-brained cousin, she never really cared for the name, but then again, it wasn't her ship. Flicking the straps of her armour off, she rolled her shoulders and sighed. Shooting to look to the small portrait on the table by her bed. Don't give me that look. They had it coming. Every last one of them no good monsters did. The portrait, if it had something to say, kept silent. With a huff she turned away from it, stepping into the hall, and nearly tripping over the stocky orange filly with the pink bobtail mane and tail. Babseed! What have I told you about hanging around outside my door? The filly cringed. Sorry, Applejack. Applejack closed her eyes and took a deep breath. When she opened them again she smiled. I'm sorry, Sugar Cube. Just a little worked up is all. Something I can do for you? Babs shrugged. Nah, I've finished my chores and was looking for something to do. I thought I'd keep you company. Ruffling the filly's mane, Applejack nodded. Sure, keep me company in the bathroom then. I'm taking a soak. Fight any big monsters on this one? Applejack smirked at the filly's excitement. I mighta. Could have been a minotaur, dozen kobolds, couple of griffins. Yeah, did she get in the way this time? Not today. In fact, she squished a kobold's head so hard the brains squirted all over Fritter. Should have seen her face. Babs burst into excited giggles. No kiddin'. So, when do you think I can come on a job? Applejack frowned thoughtfully as she pushed her way into the bathroom. A few large tubs and a couple shower stalls dominated the bulk of the room the crew used to get clean and relax in. Apple Fritter already occupied one of the tubs. She just gave Applejack a greeting nod and went back to the small novel she'd been reading. The burly mare filled a tub of her own and eased into the magically heated water. Reckon it won't be too long. You're getting pretty good with that sword of yours. We can talk to Bray if you like. See if we can't get you coming along on the few easy ones here and there. Frida snorted at that, as if Brayburn ever has any easy jobs. Applejack laughed. True enough, we get some easy ones though. He just has that luck of his. Babs snickered at her comments. Yeah, all bad. Babs perked her ears suddenly. Hey Applejack, did you hear the news? Releasing a heavy sigh, the mare eased lower into the tub. What news is that, Sugar Cube? We're picking up passengers in a couple of days, and one of them's Apple Bloom. Applejack rocketed upward in the tub. Applejack rocketed upright in the tub. What? Celestia reclined comfortably in the very large, well-worn rocking chair across from her weekly tea partner. The two shared a pot of different blend every week. One week Celestia chose, the next the other mare did. The mare in question was an ancient-looking earth pony, her green coat not in the least dulled with age, her mane and tail the same stark white they'd always been. Granny Smith, head of the Apple family, sighed blissfully as she sipped from her cup. You always pick the best, Sally. Celestia inclined her head, accepting the compliment. I don't know about that. You surprised me with that flutter pony brand you've been keeping stashed away. How long were you holding on to that one? The old mare tilted her head back as she thought. Oh, I suppose it's been about 50, 60 years. A long time, that's for sure. She broke into near hysteric cackling. Well, it was a wonderful surprise. Speaking of wonderful surprises, Granny Smith paused to sip from her cup. Seems we're about to have a proper reunion. Celestia raised an eyebrow. You consider her return a wonderful surprise? You'd be the first. When you get to be my age, you learn not to hold on to grudges. What happened in the past is a past problem. Living back then isn't doing any pony any good. The now is what I'm worried about. That's what I'm worried about too, my friend. The quiver was gone from Granny Smith's voice, as was the shivering of her old hooves. You have a plan? Or are we going with the usual throw every spell we know at him solution? Celestia laughed lightly. I have a plan, though we'll be going with the usual to start. Granny Smith nodded firmly. Good. Been too long since I got to cut loose. Celestia's mirth faded, and she sighed softly. I fear that you'll get all the opportunity you like to cut loose in the very near future, Golden Delicious. The elderly mare grinned at hearing her old name. Been a long time since any pony called me that. She casually shifted her gaze to her tea. Talked to Cobalt lately? Celestia rolled her eyes. And every pony calls me immature. Would you like to write him a note for me to deliver? The students at the academy have started a charming trend by asking if some pony likes them, then instructing them to circle yes or no at the bottom of the note. I could convey one to Cobalt if you'd like. Granny Smith snorted, as if he'd want to see a wrinkly old man like me. You're only as old as you feel, Golden. You're only as old as you feel. Smirking a little, the apple matriarch allowed a soft chuckle. A few of her wrinkles here and there were certainly less notable every time she met with Celestia. Fair enough, Sally, fair enough. Applejack, true neutral, paladin fallen 1, fighter 7, strength 20, dexterity 12, constitution 16, intelligence 9, wisdom 10, charisma 10. Brayburn, true neutral, fighter 9, strength 14, dexterity 18, constitution 17, wisdom 12, intelligence 14, charisma 16. Special gear, +2 short sword of frost, +2 short sword of acid. Crossfire, chaotic neutral, ranger 9, strength 16, dexterity 19, constitution 16, intelligence 8, wisdom 12, charisma 9. Special abilities: Favoured enemy, Ponies. Animal companion, Barkley, Timberwolf. Ditsy Do, neutral good, Cleric 7. Strength 14, Dexterity 7, Constitution 15, Intelligence 9, Wisdom 17, Charisma 16. Author's note: here we go, and longer than the rest. What transpired in Applejack's past to make her the mare she is today? Stay tuned to find out.